Sup? My name's Rodney. I'm 19 and I'm in college. Been playing poker for a year and a half, and we're finally at the point of shot taking 1-3 in Texas. Now, this is Texas 1-3. I'll be buying in for $1,000, taking two bullets with me, and playing on the TCH Austin live stream. I'm honestly really nervous playing on today's game, and I'm also really excited to see where I'm at compared to other people who've been playing the game for a while. So, we'll just see what happens. Check out the cool hands. Bye. Alrighty, on this episode of Rodney 3 Bets, there's a late position open to $20, and I'm in the button with Queen 9 of Hearts. Usually this is a fold, but I'm on the live stream. I'm here to gamble it up, so I 3 bet to $60. Small blind now cold calls, and the initial raiser and the cutoff also comes along. So we're three ways to a flop. Flop comes out Queen 4-2 flush draw, and none of our suits are on the board. So given that the small blind cold called, I don't really think that my hand's good enough to go for like three streets of value, nor would I get three streets of value from like any pocket pairs and their queen. So this time I decide to check it back when it checks to me, mostly because I don't want to get check raised because I'd have to fold. And I'm also dominated a lot by other queens here, like king queen, ace queen, queen jack, all the stuff that would like to cold call from the small blind. So I play it safe and I check it back. Turn now brings the king of hearts. It's kind of bad for my hand, but it's really good for my range. So after it checks to me again, I think it's pretty likely that my queen is good, as my opponents probably would have bet a king or a really strong draw here. So I bet about 1/3 the pot for $60 as a value bet / range bet, and only the small blind calls. So the river now brings in a pretty good card. It's the 9 of spades, flush draw bricks, and I now have middle two pair. Small blind checks it to me again, and I bet 2/3 the size of the pot for $220, and it folds through. Moving on to the next episode of Rodney 3 Bets. Button limps, small blind opens, and I look down at ace queen offsuit in the big blind. Kind of mixed between calling and raising here, but since the button limped, I decide to 3 bet this time to $90, and the small blind calls. Now heads up to a flop. Flop comes out 5-5-4, and when I look at this board, I think to myself, this is either a check or big bet flop. Reason being, I have the nut advantage here. I have a lot of ace-5 suited here. I have a lot of king-5 suited here. And I also have a lot of overpairs here. So given that my opponent called my 3-bet instead of 4-betting pre-flop, I'm putting him on like pocket pairs over the board and a lot of like ace-x, king-x suited type of junk that I need to fold out. So because of that, I decided to bet 120 into a pot of about 180, so about 2/3 pot, and the small blind calls. Turn is now pretty good for me, brings in the ace of hearts, and I have top pair. Now, generally with my range that shows up here, even though I do have a lot of ace-x and top pair like I do have here, I also have a lot of under pairs, jacks, queens, kings, tens, nines, eights, all that type of stuff that doesn't really want to bet this card because my opponent will have a lot of ace-x floats. So I decide to check back my top pair. That way I have top pair in my range on the river. So when the river is now the king of clubs, and it checks back to me again, I'm now looking to get maximum value from any ace highs, king highs that floated and just don't believe me. So I go really big. I go 250 into 432, about 60% of the pot. And my opponent snap folds. Alrighty. 3 limps to me in the big blind. I have ace king offsuit straddles on, and I bump it up to $50. Guy on my left cold calls, and we're heads up to a flop. Board comes out 7-5-5 rainbow. Very similar to the last hand we played, like that 5-5-4 hand. I do the same thing. I bet big, and he folds. Cool stuff. Finally, a hand that we do not 3-bet. Psych. This middle position open to $15, and I'm in the button with king queen offsuit. I elect to 3-bet to $50. Guy on my left cold calls again, and middle position now thinks, he looks at me, he says this guy's full of shit, and he bumps it up to $200. I'm folding everything here. If I had jacks, I fold. If I had queens, I I cry and I call. But anything below queens, I fold. So I fold, guy on my left calls, and turns out the guy had aces. So good on me. God is good because I have ace king offsuit again. Straddle is on, $6 straddle is on, and I'm in the +1. I open it up to $15 and a lot of people call. In fact, we are four ways to a flop. And the flop comes King Queen 8 Rainbow. Checks to me, and I go for 1/3 the size of the pot, $20. I don't really have big sizings multi-way. I kind of like just betting small and then betting big on the turn if I have it or don't have it. So that's what I do. Two people call, hijacking the cutoff, and we're now three ways to a turn. Turn pairs, the bottom pair. Brings out the 8 of spades. Board's now King Queen 8-8. Given the pre-flop action, it's very possible someone could have an 8 here. But it's also possible someone could have a queen, or even worse, a worse king, or a draw. And for all those reasons, I think it's better to bet this card than not. So I like to go for half pot, about $60 into 120. Now only the hijack calls. River comes out, King of Hearts. I'm running hot. I have pretty much the best hand at this point. Now, at this point, I think I actually kind of misplay. In my head, I thought the pot was like 400 or something. I thought it was like 480, and I was going to go for a 2/3 bet. I ended up betting 350, an overbet. But when I think about it now, I actually like block sizing here. I think that's a better move because if there's a queen here that's kind of stubborn, I don't think a queen's going to call me off in this stream if I bet big. And on top of that, if the guy has a bluff, if I bet like block size, if I go for like a fifth of the pot here or a fourth of the pot, it's going to incentivize a lot of his bluffs to start bluffing. So, given that the queen's not calling me big, bluffs aren't going to rebluff into big sizing. I really like going like $50 into this pot, but I didn't do that in the moment, and I bet $350. A little bit of overplay, maybe so. He folds. I missed out on value, possibly. So that's what happens. For the next hand, we've got Jack 4 suited and the big blind, and finally we are not squeezing. There's an open from under the gun, +1, +2, and the button all call. And when it gets to me, I decide to call too. Flop comes out 9-8-5 flush draw. My flush draw is on board. And now the initial raiser C bets for 1/3 the pot, $25. And now things get a little bit interesting. Guy in the +2 now bumps it up to $75. And we're faced with the first decision. Do I raise here? Do I call? Do I fold? All of them feel pretty bad, but I end up deciding to just fold because I think at best, since I don't have the nut flush draw, I could be dominated by other flush draws. And worst case scenario, I'm maybe flipping, but it's highly unlikely that I'm just beat and I don't have the equity to call. So that's what I do. I fold. Boom. Get some single raise pot action. We are in the low jack with ace-6 of hearts. Folds to me and I open it up to $10. Button, small blind, and the big blind come along for the ride, and we are four ways to a flop. Ace, Jack, 6, Rainbow. We flop two pair with backdoor flush draw. I don't have big sizing on Rainbow boards, so I go for the 1/3 bet of $20 into 60, and only the button calls. Turn is now the King of Diamonds, and we have our first decision. Do we keep barreling, or do we check it to the opponent and see what he wants to do? Now, this current opponent had been getting shown a bunch of bluffs as of late, and as a result, I noticed him trying to bluff more. At least he's just seemed more aggressive. Now, with my current holding, I have two pair, but it isn't really that good in the grand scheme of things. There's a straight that gets there, and against a range like a jack, a worse ace, or maybe even a king, I don't really think I'm going to get three streets of value here. In fact, I don't even think I'm going to get another street of value here. And the only thing that I'm hoping to get value from is a flush draw or worse two pair. Now, on top of that, against a more aggro opponent, if I'm raised in this spot, given that we're so deep, I don't really like having to call off stacks on a river. So I kind of think it's best to just check it to my opponent and see what he wants to do. So for all those reasons, that's what I end up doing. I check to him and he snap bets $50 for half of the pot. Now, I generally read snap bets as a bit weaker in live settings, But looking more into his sizing, I think more nuttish hands like Queen 10 or other two pairs will want to bet bigger here, especially with a flush draw on board. And because of this, I range my opponent more towards draws and weak aces. Now, given this range, I now think that check raising is now a better move than just check calling, as I would want to go large here and try to get like a massive bet in on the river against these type of holdings. So that's what I do. I raise it up to $200 and he tank calls. Now, the river is probably one of the worst cards in the deck for me. So Jack of Spades, now pairing the Jack and counterfeiting my ace. Flush draw doesn't get there, but I think we're now chopping against any ace holdings at best. So I guess it's time to kind of bluff catch, see what he wants to do again. I checked, he checked back thankfully, and my ace is good. Alright, so we got two more hands to look at. For this hand, the $6 straddle's on, and there's a late position limp. I look down at King Jack offsuit in the cutoff, and usually against an early position limp, I think it's fine to just fold this hand, as you're often going up against suited aces, but this time I open it up to $25. The button, straddler, and the low jack call, bringing us four ways to a flop. Ace King 10 Rainbow. I've got middle pair with an alright kicker on a board that I should be dominating a lot given the pre-flop action. So because of this, I bet small, $30 into about 130 or so. I get called by the button and the low jack. Turn is pretty magical. Queen of clubs now giving me a weird Broadway. And now I think that a lot of my range would be checking here. And I don't ever think that a worse pair would ever call me on this turn if I barrel. So if I had bluffs here, like maybe a suited king, like king X of spades, like king 5 of spades, king 9 of spades, I think I would turn those hands into a bluff here. But my hand is just the nuts, and I'm trying to get value, so I check when it checks to me. River now brings in the 10 of clubs, so the flush is on board, and a lot of the sets that I would have here are now booted up. I don't think I'm getting called big by any single pair holding, or even any two pair holding. So I go put out a little feeler bet of $70, block bet sizing to hope that, an unbelieving queen or king or ace just calls. But that's not what happens. Everyone folds through, and I get the pot. Alright, for the last hand of the night, we have a super interesting hand. No spoilers, but I'm in the +1 with pocket sixes. The straddle's on, $6 straddle's on, and I open it up to $15. Hijack, cutoff, button, straddler call. We're 5 ways to a flop, and the board comes out queen high, queen 3-2, flush draw. And I have both of the suits that are on board. So on a board like this, and against sticky opponents in particular, I think I need to be doing a lot of thin value betting from people who are going to call if they have a 3 on their hand, from people who have like on their pairs to me. And against like people who have a queen on this board, given that I have like flush draw blockers, I do think that if I bet big for 3 streets here, on a lot of rivers, I think I can get a queen to fold. So because of that, I start building my story that I have a good hand here by betting a little around half pot. I bet $40 into 80, and 2 people call, specifically the hijack and the cutoff. Now the turn brings the 10 of spades. Doesn't really change anything. If I had a queen here, I'm probably still ahead. If I had, I don't know. If I was good, I'm good. That's what I'm thinking. And if I were bluffing, I'd still be bluffing. So I bet big again here on the turn. I bet 155 into about 200, about 75% of the pot. And now only the guy on my left calls, hijack calls. At this point, I think I'm ready to give up unless there's a good card for me. But the river doesn't bring that good card. It's a 7 of hearts. And I think that against people who have a queen here, I'm just getting snapped off if I bet again. And there's no point in just trying to force a play. Against a lot of draws, I'm still ahead of draws. So it's time to realize equity and hope for the best. So I check it to my opponent on the turn. Pot's about 509. He's got about 900 in the stack or whatever. But at this point, when I check it to him, something weird happens. He instantly starts touching his chips. He's trying to figure out what he's going to bet. He didn't think, he just went straight to grabbing his chips. And usually in live poker, I read this movement of just instantly going for your chips as weak. And that's not the main thing of why I make decisions, but it's something I'm thinking about, because if they had a good hand, they're probably eyeing the pot. They're thinking, how much can I get away with from betting here? And it's usually more like precise. But he ends up betting 280 after like counting his chips for a bit. Now at this point, the mannerism's already weird. But when I think about like theory at this point, I think to myself, well, hey, we're multi-way on the turn. And if on the turn he had something good, like a set, like set of threes, set of twos, I'm pretty sure he's going to try and raise and build the pot because we are pretty deep and the SVR was pretty big on the turn. That being said, if he had anything like a two pair, like Queen 10 or Queen 7, or for God's sake, 10-7, that for some reason wanted to float me, I also think that this guy would have raised all his two pairs on the turn. So at this point, when he makes this bet, I don't think that a big queen is going to be betting for more than half pot here. If he had ace queen, that's pretty much the absolute best that he could have at this point. But I just don't believe that ace queen's betting like more than $200 here. I think ace queen's going for like 1/3 the size of the pot or mostly checking back. So at this point, if you kind of think about what he could show up with, he's got flush draws, a lot of flush draws out there. King X suited, Ace X suited, King Jack. And if you think about his value combinations, he's got Ace Queen, King Queen, maybe Queen Jack, maybe Queen Jack. But the ratio of just value to bluff, it just doesn't make a lot of sense here. I think about his mannerisms as well. I think about, this guy's been getting bluffed a lot. He's trying to, repair, and all these things lead me more towards flicking in the call with my pocket sixes. So that's what I end up doing. I called. He says I'm good. I show over the sixes, and we win the pot.
Eight calls. Showing a pair of sixes.
Make sure I don't have it. Yeah, I don't have it.
Alright, pot orders to 8. Button moves to 5.
Alright, so that marks the end of all the cool hands that I played during the live stream. This was my first time shot taking 1-3, especially playing on the TCH Austin live stream. Pretty glad that it worked in my favor. When I first sat down, I was actually like really nervous. My stomach was hurting, I was shaking a lot. But after I 3-bet a couple of times, I was feeling more in my usual groove. As for the future, not really sure if I'll make another vlog. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Recently I've been feeling really burnt out from playing poker, as before shot taking 1-3, I had been grinding out 1-2 at my local card houses for about 4 or 5 months. And in that span, I've built up to 10K all-time profits, which is pretty cool. But the next step would be, trying to be a 1-3 to 2-5 reg. And that just takes like, I don't know, it just seems like a lot of time, a lot more work to put into my craft if I want to keep on winning. So stay tuned, maybe never. Thanks for watching. See ya.